Wow, so the eclipses hit, and we're now in the aftermath of these eclipses, which were quite heavy, weren't they? Really powerful eclipses, and we've seen a lot in the outer reality, and I'm sure in your own inner reality, a lot of intensification and, you know, like a vibrating sort of, like a raw nerve. You might be feeling like a raw nerve. This is sometimes what can happen, and I think that the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Pisces has made this eclipse season, also with Mercury retrograde, has made it a little bit hard to articulate what has happened, or hard to manage or even notate, which is a Mercury theme, what we've been feeling or going through. And so give yourself some time here after we come out of these eclipses to settle into maybe what even has happened for you, and to recalibrate or cohere anew around what you may be being pulled into here, because a lot of stuff's going to change very fast. We get whole new stories. We kind of reset the themes here very, very soon in May, into June, and into the rest of the year. So yeah, I mean, Mercury's still retrograde. That's completing soon. Mars will leave Pisces. That's completing soon, just as a tidbit preview for what I want to cover here. But this video is about the full moon in Scorpio. Just a little bit of a check-in, you know, with these full moons, which with new moons are like little stopping points on our path. We can always check in with the new moon and the full moon and the symbolism of the new and full moon, just to see where we're at. I think the main thing with this full moon is to understand just how great of a martial moment we're in. We had a solar eclipse in Aries. Mars rules Aries by domicile. We have now a full moon in Scorpio. Mars rules Scorpio by domicile. We've had full Mercury retrogrades in Aries, a Mars ruled sign. We have had Mars meeting Saturn. So Mars was brought to the forefront with its, you know, every 2-year malefic meeting with Saturn. It's been quite a martial moment, and I think you can see that with the news stories. I'm recording this a day or two after the Iranian barrage of missiles into Israel. And that sense of escalation, I haven't seen anything quite like the precipice of maybe a greater war. Only a few times in my lifetime have I felt this kind of energy, where you have great powers launching missiles at each other. And that's Mars. Mars is warfare. We see that in the aftermath of an eclipse ruled by Mars. Even that lunar eclipse in Libra had Venus in Pisces and Saturn and Pisces as the ruling planets, with Mars and Pisces. So Mars has been mixing and accentuated and front-burnered for much of this recent astrology, and sadly we see warfare. You know, this is very human. This is why astrology is like the matrix of reality. It's the symbolic matrix of our world. And when you see symbols brought to the forefront, and then you see reality emerging to match that symbolic meaning set, that's why we do astrology. And we see it often, and that's just the nature of where we're at and what is happening. You know, you may want to look for that to even get more shocking, more upheavals, more surprises. I'm recording on the 15th of April. 21 April, Jupiter and Uranus meet in Taurus. And that could also, just by its nature of those two planets expanding surprise, bring continued upheaval. I'm not sure I even know what's happening. I definitely don't know what's going on. And I think that Piscean Mars, that Neptune in Pisces, there's a lot of confusion about just what the escalations are, just how far it may go. Is this a nothing burger? Is this going to stop? Is it more controlled? Is it kind of pre-planned, pre-narrativized? Or are these out of control events that may accelerate? And we just don't quite know. And this, I think, is a great example of the Piscean, and the Piscean nature of not really knowing what is real or what is false. And then Mars being there, and that's the war. And so I think a lot of this stuff may clarify as Mars gets into Aries. We might have a much more certain sense of the movement of this war and where it's going, and whether it being over or not. I just saw a Sun Tzu quote that said the best fighters know that not fighting is the most effective way to fight. So maybe cooler heads might prevail once Mars gets strong. It's a way that a strong Mars can often operate, is I choose not to fight because the true fighter knows that you don't want to be in a hot kinetic war. That's not good. And so fighters that are very skilled can avoid that. So what is Mars? I mean, we gotta explore Mars always. Basic technique in astrology, domicile lord of the new moon or full moon. Mars is action, to put simply. To distill it into its core energetic, it's the actions that we take. And oftentimes action is difficult. It's hard to initiate action. People don't like the actions that we take. Often we take actions and we push out against the settled stasis of reality. When you act, you break free, and you break anew, and you create new things. And so that's the central component of Mars, the action and the pushback that comes from that action. But I think we might just think about that as a theme here, especially with the water signs, Moon in Scorpio, Mars in Pisces, acting in the internal self, acting with the internal self. What do we want? What are we feeling? How can you act with emotion? Well, you can generate feeling, right? These are like all kinds of manifesting techniques and technologies where people engender feelings internally as an action, as a way to jibe and support the actions that they desire in the outer world. I think that can be a big part of this moment. You know, it's also a spiritual principle, and Pisces has certainly a great spiritual component. As Jupiter rules Pisces, it's the spirituality, it's the last sign, right? So it's the collective oneness of being. I've talked about that quite a lot recently. And what is spirituality? Can be an action, staying into spiritual action, daily prayer, daily meditation. You know, Mars has what's called this planetary joy in the 6th house of the daily grind of life. And so you may bring a spiritualized, view into your daily grind of life so that you can act to support yourself and your inner world and your spirit and your inner containers. You know, staying in the present moment is a spiritual action. Everybody talks about being in the moment. And I think with these news stories and with the war happening, and maybe these escalations that you open up any app and it's like war escalating, that could be fear-inducing. The antidote to fear often is just action. What am I doing? I'm going to stay into action today, build what I'm building. Do what I'm doing, love who I'm loving, and just be present in the moment. It's cliche, I know, but present moment action and bringing the attention and awareness into what the hands are building is certainly a martial technology, certainly Mars and Pisces, and is certainly one way into this martial moment as we all process the unfolding reality and the tensions in this unfolding reality. Well, the other thing I want to say is that this last degrees of Pisces, where Mars will be in this full moon and until 30 April when it enters Aries, is the most powerful section of Pisces for Mars. Mars loves this part of Pisces. It has its face or decan here in the last 10 degrees. Many of those degrees, 6 or 7 of them, are Mars's Egyptian term as well. And so this is an extremely potent and powerful Mars, and I think it's appropriate that we get this powerful Mars as Mercury's finishing out its retrograde. That station direct to Mercury on the 25th is a big signal to move forward here in spring. And then as Mars is in Pisces preparing to enter Aries, where it will get even more strength, more outer world strength, I think this Pisces Mars is very good to go back to what I said, the inner action. And even just to finish up Mercury retrograde, processing our planning. Action can be planning. It can be feeling and then planning. And Mercury stations direct, Mars moves into Aries 5 days later. I think we'll very much be in our outer world building phase in May. And this moment, this full moon moment, and this last 7 days of April is a great one to be more in the emotional prep phase of action. So I wish that for you. And even using the derived houses from the full moon technique that I so love, Scorpio is the rising sign. The moon, full moon in Scorpio will be the first house. Mars rules also the 6th, Aries. And so you have a first 6th house component built in. This is the nature of Mars as it rules Scorpio rising charts. It also rules that 6th house, but then Mars in the 5th. And so I go back to what I said earlier, the creative actions, that's 5th house, the way we can sort of creatively engage the daily grind of life to expand the self, with the water signs being the way that we mirror our world and the people around us, the sensitivities we might have. Mars is about, let's just act. And so go with what feels good for you in terms of your daily routines as you're building out this spring and what you're going to be involved in the rest of the year, because stuff's going to go crazy soon, wildly crazy. When Jupiter enters Gemini in May, there was a little Gemini moon here in mid-April, and I could just feel how chaotic things got. And quickly, just to bring in William Lilly, the famous English astrologer, 17th century, just some of the things he says about Mars. He talks about being bold and confident, valiant, willing to obey nobody. These are the kind of things you may want to consider. What feels right to you. Don't consider other people. Don't think about what feels right to other people. It's what you like to do. What is your 5th house of creativity and generativity calling you to participate in, and then daily commitments to those actions. That's embedded here, and that's a martial theme. That's a scorpionic theme. That's a theme of Aries. These martial symbols that are so much a part of this full moon moment. He goes on to talk about how it's bakers, so you use heat to make things. It is tailors or people that make weapons. But there's a component of Mars that is, what are you building? What are you doing and making? And I want you to consider that too in this full moon moment. What do you want to be making now, and what will you continue to make as this world goes mad? But you don't have to go mad with it. You can focus on your building and doing. Okay, that's a huge theme of this moment. And so it's kind of like what gets you off, really. Joseph Campbell has this thing of follow your bliss. What's exciting you? I was talking to a friend here recently about her photography, and we were, telling her, a friend of mine and me, you've got to find what motivates you in your creative journey. What do you have to do independent of what anybody else is doing or what anybody else is telling you to? What are you compelled to do because you are here to do that? And this is a kind of a Piscean Mars question, is what is that, the inner opening of ourselves where we have kind of enlightenment around the actions? That is to say, God has given us a task, and then we're here to execute those orders from a divine kind of certainty around our creative powers. Remember, Mars in Pisces, in the 5th house, in the derived houses chart from this full moon. So that said, it's a lot of Mars, but it's also a lot of Venus in this moment. And I wanted to come back into a little bit here at the end of the video, some of the Mars and Venus combinations that can be so pertinent now, because remember, Sun, Jupiter in Taurus, ruled by Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Pisces, ruled by Venus by exaltation, and then Venus and Aries, ruled by Mars. And so there's this Mars-Venus double combo embedded in this chart, Venus and Aries, Mars and Pisces. These are things like the inflamed imagination, where Venus triggers you something, I love this, oh my God, I'm so excited about something. And that might be the Venus and Aries, a burst of attraction that then has to then be brought back into, these sensitivities of Mars and Pisces, of feeling into the best way to bring about something. Even stepping back a little bit with Pisces, being the 12th sign from Aries, and saying, okay, retreating into some kind of inner temple to modulate the inflamed passions of this Venus and Aries and what those might be pulling you into. Venus and Aries, it's often best to kind of sometimes delay some of the Venus and Aries triggering, because sometimes it's so hot that we end up doing things or feeling things that aren't quite accurate. We need to let Venus settle. Venus will settle here as it enters Taurus on the 29th of April. And so you might want to, take a step back a little bit and come back to those questions we talked about earlier in the video, which were how to process the self and how to feel into what you're here to do and make, and focus more on the daily rhythms of that making rather than the bursts of attraction that might also be destabilizing. It's kind of like impulsive intuition with Mars and Venus in the position that they're in here. And so you might want to let those impulses, feel into impulse. Impulse can be wonderful. It's like a drug. Wow, you're feeling so moved to connect in certain ways, but you need to temper that and tether that. It's like a boat, you're not going to have a lot of success if you're riding on the sea and you don't have a rudder and a plan and a map. You've got to use that Mars to sort of build up that tethering so that you're able to sort of stay on course. So that's just kind of my final message here. Enjoy the coming out of eclipse season, enjoy the maybe reconnecting to what's real and tangible. And we move out from this full moon moment. This is almost a climax of one phase. Let's call it the Mars and Pisces phase of this year, which included Saturn and Mars meeting, which included eclipse season. This is the climax, full moon being a climax. This is the climax of that. And then from here, we're going to wane in this next lunar cycle. We wane into a new moon in Taurus that kicks off a whole nother phase of the year. And May is going to be big. I'll have a whole video on my May breakdown. But enjoy this climax, and I hope it's been good for you. I hope if you've been destabilized, that you're resettling and things have been maybe cut out of your life. That's what eclipses do. That's what Mars does. It's here to cut things away. It's here to sever, so you can move into a better selfhood and a better life, And so as you're settling into these new realities, post-Martial severing, just enjoy it, because the astrology does get much, much better. You'll have Venus entering Taurus on the 29th. You'll have Mars entering Aries on the 30th. And then we can very much move into our power and move into the rest of our spring with a lot of, hopefully, pleasure for May for you. That Taurian pleasure will be a major theme of that May video. So take care of yourself out there. I hope you're doing wonderful. Peace to you, and it's glad to be with you. I'll talk to you really soon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.